If you want to get early access to all of our daily videos, please consider joining our Patreon. I'll put a link below. Here it is on the screen. Again, you get early access to all the daily videos, ad-free, early, before anyone else gets to see them. Have at it. And you can help support the channel. Bitcoin and UAP. What do those two things have in common? Well, depending on what you said, Matthew Pines agrees. Because Matthew Pines is someone who's been around in the UFO community for a little bit, and often people wonder, how does this guy have so much information about UAPs when he's involved with Bitcoin? Well, in the video today, we're going to learn from a recent interview he did with Ross Coulthart on News Nation, why he's even interested in this subject, who he's now involved with in this topic, right? And what does he think, is going to be happening soon? But first, let's learn a little bit more about who Matthew Pines is.
Today, we're interviewing Matthew Pines, who's just taken on the role as executive director of a DC-based think tank called the Bitcoin Policy Institute, which is a non-profit that explores and researches the policy and societal implications of Bitcoin and cyber currency. But of course, that's not why we've brought him here today. In previous roles, he's advised the US government on national preparedness and emerging technology, and he's also served as Director of Intelligence for a geopolitical and cyber security consultancy. Matthew studied physics and philosophy at Johns Hopkins University and went on to earn a master's degree with distinction from the London School of Economics. He's also been conspicuous in his commentary and analysis on the emerging UAP mystery. Is there a cover-up?
Okay, so clearly the guy's very smart, well off, well educated, had a career, good one, but how is he involved with UAP?
He's taken on a role as a strategic advisor for Alex Clocus's Enia Explorers Club, which includes Jake Barber's Skywatcher operation. And incredible as it may sound to the people that Matthew probably normally advises, Skywatcher has at its heart allegations that a cadre of people inside the US government and private aerospace have secretly colluded to conceal the recovery of non-human technology, alien craft, from public knowledge. Skywatcher is an independent, private equity-funded initiative that intends to prove something the Pentagon categorically denies, that there is evidence of non-human intelligence engaging with this planet, and that alien tech really has been and can be recovered and hopefully reverse engineered, this time by good old-fashioned capitalistic private enterprise through Skywatcher rather than the dark forces of the so-called deep state.
Wow. That's quite a promise. So it sounds like Matthew Pines is part of Skywatcher, which I actually just covered in a live stream today. I'm going to put a link in the description because go check it out. It has everything to do with Skywatcher and part of what they're doing here with Alex Clocus and all that. So I highly recommend it. Now, so it sounds like Matthew Pines is a part of Skywatcher, right? And you just heard everything that they're trying to uncover, right? Well, that's how Matthew Pines knows all this information, right? He's been hooked up with these guys for a while, because I've been wondering for a long time how he knows so much. He's always come out in interviews and talked about knowing so much. It's like, how do you know all this information? You're saying a lot of things, right? How do you know all this? And clearly it's just stuff he's been told. I'm not really sure what he's witnessed for himself, and I wish Ross would have asked him that. Have you had a personal experience? What have you seen? Right. Maybe he said it in other interviews, but I don't know. I can't follow everything. But it seems like that's where you would start with somebody in this conversation. You know what I mean? But look, it's a great interview. I'll put a link in the description. Please go check it out. Okay, now we kind of know how he knows a lot of the information he knows and what, new company, Skywatcher, that he's a part of, right? And the claims that they're making, which are huge. How do you get from Bitcoin to this? Like, what happened?
Matthew Pines, I have to say, firstly, welcome to Reality Check. And isn't covering UAPs one hell of a pivot from what you normally do in the sober world of national security?
Well, first off, thank you, Ross. I've admired your work, and I appreciate you bringing me on to your show. It may seem like that, but my through line throughout my sort of academic and professional career has always been thinking about one frontier subjects. When I was a young lad, I thought I was going to get a PhD in physics, maybe even a PhD in philosophy at the same time. So I was always interested in these more foundational and kind of frontier questions, and then embarked on a career in national security where a lot of the analysis and work I did was focused on these what if questions, like what if there is a improvised nuclear device sort of terrorist attack? What if there is full on nuclear war? What if there are crippling cyber attacks? What if you have global pandemics? These sort of low probability, high consequence events are things the government has to plan and prepare for. And so I did a lot of analysis exercises, operational experimentation to try to sketch out what that scenarios what those scenarios might look like. And so UAPs, right, as sort of fantastical they are, they sort of represent maybe the most high consequence and maybe prima facie low probability scenario, but which would have significant implications. And so even if you think it's unlikely, you have to take it seriously if there are credible indications as came to the fore over the past number of years that this is a scenario that can't just be dismissed. And so then wearing my normal sort of analytic national security hat on, this is a what if scenario that had to be addressed very seriously. And I think it's only become more pressing over the years.
I mean, that's a reasonable answer, right? But it doesn't really answer the question of like who you met and how it got started. You know what I mean? Like, what are those details? How did you meet Jake Barber? How did you get involved with Skywatcher? Some of that, right? And what, anyway. But look, I can totally understand we all want the answers to some of these, as he puts it, frontier questions. I totally get that. And, he's going to make an argument of like, how Bitcoin and UAP sort of, fit together as well. But look, we'll get to that in a moment. Let's see exactly what does Matthew think about reverse engineering programs?
Separately from the allegations of David Grush, Lou Elizondo, all the known people, Jake Barber, have you, in your time trawling the halls of power, chatting quietly with senators and congresspeople, have you ever heard the whispers that there is this program in operation, this reverse engineering program with retrieved non-human technology?
I mean, I've heard... Again, it's like there's an elephant and you touch a tail, you touch a toe, you touch a tusk, and you're like, I think this is an elephant, but nobody comes out and says it's an elephant, right? It's a very unusual tusk. It's a very unusual tail, right? So there's obviously individuals that are in the public domain, the folks that have come out, spoken at Soul Foundation, that have made the clear and declarative, allegation of these programs, and those folks have the bona fides, and I'm very confident in the quality and the source of their assertions. But it also comports with other information that I've, gleaned in various more snippets, right, of that elephant that, generally paint this mosaic of, yes, like these are longstanding, I think somewhat fragmented, compartmentalized programs that, exist across a smattering of different defense primes, and then, are custodied in a variety of different locations. And this is an active program at scale that's been, long running.
I'm going to be respectful here for sure, but I don't think he answered that question at all, right? He kind of just, Ross was trying to get him to say, apart from these other main guys that you've heard from, what have you heard, right? And he just mentions that again. And again, it always falls back on, well, credible people with bona fides, as he puts it, right? They're bona fides. They're credible, so I trust what they're saying. If they're saying aliens are here, then I trust that aliens are here, right? And he just jumps in that boat. But then he's like, I glean little pieces here and there. From what? What are we talking about? Glean little pieces? From what? Clearly there's got to be conversation, stuff that we're not privy to. But what evidence has he seen? That would have been the better question to ask. And I'm not criticizing Ross's questioning abilities. I often, whatever, should always look back and go, I should ask a question this way and that way, and whatever. So it happens. It's a great question from Ross, actually, because the way he purports at the beginning, right? Aside from these people, what do you know? You know what I mean? But maybe a follow-up question. What evidence have you seen? But still, I don't think Matthew answered that question at all. Now, listen to what he has to say about Israelis' involvement with UAP and how plausible the assertions have been made about Israel and from Israel. If you remember, the former head of their space agency put out a book and basically claimed that the United States government and other governments were in agreements with aliens, right, called the Galactic Federation, and we had an agreement with them. Donald Trump knew, other people knew, but we had an agreement with aliens, straight out of Star Trek, right? This was the former head of the Israeli space agency. This isn't just anybody saying this, right? And you'll hear Matthew bring that up. And it's interesting to think about Israelis' involvement in UAP. And it's an interesting question from Ross to begin with, because this doesn't get brought up very much like this. But I think I know why Ross asked the question. It's because Matthew kind of hints at it in his answer. See if you can listen for it. He kind of, brings up an interview that he had done.
One thing that I was told by a very good source was that Israel is much more intimately involved in the legacy program than has previously been disclosed to date. Have you ever heard any intimations of the Israelis being involved?
I mean, well, there's the famous, sort of Haim Ashed book where he alleges that. I haven't heard anything firsthand about that. I strongly suspect it. And recently, I was in a conversation with, and this is recorded, so it'll be public, that will basically describe kind of someone very connected to Israel, talking about the subject. And it relates, in general to, what we think about, the Israeli military complex and how close it was to the U.S. Complex. And, we have embarked on kind of a sensitive relationship with Israel over the years, right? Like we have very sensitive technology transfer programs with them. They also have very sensitive technology transfer programs with us because they often have breakthroughs that we don't get because they're extremely good. But of course, they live in a much more volatile environment, right? So they would have an acute interest in, operationalizing some capabilities that maybe we would much more like to hold back, right? For say a really covert ISR thing. So there's an inherent risk associated with, Israel's programs, like leading to disclosure of some advancements, because their threshold for operational deployment is going to be much, say, lower than ours, right? But no, I strongly suspect that most governments of some advancement, essentially, I expect that almost every government that has a nuclear program probably has something like, a UAP program, at different stages of maturity and understanding. But I don't think it's actually like that much of a there's that much of a monopoly, around the great powers.
All right, that's an interesting outlook there, right? It's kind of like Mossad has entered the picture, right? Is that what's going on there, right? Again, interesting question to ask from Ross to Matthew, to be honest with you. Just look, I watch a lot of interviews. This doesn't get brought up. It always gets brought up through the Israeli Space Agency, but the way Ross brought up the question is kind of interesting on its own. But Matthew just kind of saying, just seems inevitable that they would be involved. Any program or any country with some sort of, nuclear program or something is going to have, some sort of UAP involvement. But let's look to the future. What can we expect from, disclosure, the UAP topic, the UAP movement, whatever you want to call it? Because, again, Matthew Pines is part of Skywatcher, which is making some big claims that are supposedly supposed to happen from now until, the end of the year, right? Somewhere in the next 11 months, something as big is going to be happening. Disclosure, they're going to bring global awareness, as Matthew Pines is going to put it, about the knowledge of non-human intelligence on Earth.
So, Matthew, final question. I want you to put on your crystal ball. What's going to happen? Are we going to see big D disclosure, or is this all going to be swept under the carpet for another 30 years?
I'm never 100%. I think we are on an irreversible path towards the reality of non-human intelligence being a subject of mass awareness. I don't know exactly how soon, but I think that's an irreversible process at this point. And yeah, it's just a matter of the path to that point. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Big claims, big promises. Let's see if Skywatcher delivers. Now, I will put a link in the description to the live stream that I made that I highly recommend you watch about Skywatcher. And, of course, a link in the description to watch this full Matthew Pies interview with Ross Coulthart. It was actually very interesting. Matthew is very well spoken. He's very easy to listen to about this, for sure. So he gives good interviews. Let's put it that way. So, and you can learn a little bit more about, the Bitcoin connection with UAP as well, because it goes deep, right? I mean, essentially, it's just they're both headed down the same path, right? So he just sees it as one and the same, So anyway, all right, y'all. We'll see you guys in the next video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.